Welcome back, everyone. This is Classic Homesteading Practices, and today we're going to be talking about sheep. Now, I'm really excited to talk about sheep because this is probably, again, an animal that doesn't seem to get enough talked about it. And the reason why I say that is because sheep are some of the most hilarious animals. And unlike goats, even though they look so much similar, they're vastly different in the way that they work. They are funnier. They are a little bit more skittish. They are definitely a herd animal, but they aren't as picky as a goat is, and they definitely have more of a resistant to weather change than goats do. And the reason why I am giving you a side-by-side or using goats as a reference towards sheep is because in the sheep and goat community, goat owners call sheep the red-headed stepchild to goats. Reason being is because they are just so different in how they act with one another. Goats are very prissy, prim and proper. Sheep are more of a loud, obnoxious, loving, and shy creature until they get to know their owners. And after that, while they are still a little bit shy, they will definitely come up for love. They will do a lot more and be less stubborn than goats in handling. And again, when they're outside and wind and rain happens, sheep will just stand out there and keep on eating, unlike goats who refuse to stand out in the rain. Refuse it. It's the most hilarious thing to watch when rain starts to fall. On one side, you have sheep just bleating, having a good time, chewing on their cud, and then goats on the other side just side-eyeing sheep, thinking that they're crazy for being out there in the mud and the rain. It's hilarious. But the biggest reason why sheep are a very important and wonderful creature is because they are the easiest when it comes to growing material to make clothing. They are the largest clothing maker in America, especially when it comes to the wool textile. They are easy to keep, easy to transport, easy to shear, and easy to eat, in my humble opinion. If you guys have ever had turkey on Thanksgiving, you should try a rack of lamb. That stuff is juicy and delicious. And they are also just the sweetest of animals. So, let's go ahead and talk about how we house these animals. Now, sheep need about 8 square feet at the minimum to live in and have a shelter. So if you have a shed, then this is perfect. Now, there are some people who believe you should go to 12 square feet up to 16 square feet, especially if you have multiple goats that are pregnant, because it is going to be easier for you when they have lambs to deal with and you just have an extra amount of space for your ewes. Really quickly, ewes are female sheep while rams are male sheep. You can also call them does, but usually they stick to ewes and rams, but you can always call them does and bucks if necessary, if that is your pleasure. Sheep are usually polled. They do not have horns, but there are a lot of people who keep their sheep horned just in case they are living out in an area with predators. And or if they're on open pasture. Now, while the infrastructure is a lot more simple for a sheep, because sheep learn their boundaries a lot more easily than most animals, so you can have a regular flimsy fence all the way to no fence at all and just have an electrical wire that you string up a couple of inches off the ground. You would usually want to do it about one on the ground, one at 2 feet, and one at 4 feet, just to keep it in snout range, especially when it comes to wintertime and they have a full fleece on, and then that wire means nothing. But usually sheep are pretty good at learning their boundaries after they've been set. Though if you want to put them in a place where it is their space and their space alone, because you don't have that much space on your farm, your homestead, wherever you're at, I would just say go ahead and build a standalone wooden or metal fencing and let it be. Personally, I would go with 5 feet, because again, sheep are less likely to jump over a fence than goats are, mainly because, again, they have to deal with a fleece that goats don't have to, though it might be a different instance when they get their fleece off in the spring. But other than that, I have never seen a sheep personally jump over a fence after they know their boundaries. Again, you need to be able to give them a proper area where you would put about 6 goats, my bad. See, I'm always thinking about goats when it comes to sheep. You do 6 sheep to an acre or 3 sheep to a half acre, unless you're supplementing and giving them hay and their minerals in a specific area. Then you're able to shorten it down to about 60 square feet per sheep in their outside area. But in all honesty, if you want to keep the cost of feed down, I would definitely say give them as much space as possible to mow, because it keeps your bill down. Now for feed. Sheep are like most other animals on the farm. They are grass and bush eaters, mostly grass. So if you have good grass growing in your area, just let them mow your yard, and that will be the most of their meal. Now, other parts of their diet you need to be aware of. Goats do need a vitamin and mineral pack. They do need copper, just not on the same level as goats. They actually have a problem processing copper, so you have to minimize the amount of copper that they get in a day, which is really simple. You just get the sheep ration over at your local pet food store or animal livestock store, and it will show on the back that the amount between goat and sheep is different. It is very different. While most other animals are able to process copper, and it's very good for their system, it's good for sheep's system as well. It's just copper will stay inside of the liver more often. And also, if they're getting regular amounts of copper that is over their dose that they need, they can compound that copper in their liver and then just slowly die from it, or die from copper poisoning. So just keep in mind, don't interchange their feed or their types of vitamin blocks for others just because of that copper, that mineral problem that they have with their liver. Just be on the safe side and get them specifically sheep vitamins. So for rations, you can do a grass pellet. If you do not want to do hay, which is fairly simple, they have a sheep ration again at your local livestock store. But in all honesty, it's more to be as a supplement instead of an actual diet, make sure that you have some grass or some lawn for your sheeps. In order to have a healthy gut and for them to live properly, it's just part of them being ruminants. They need to be able to chew their cud and to process it properly instead of having it as a pelleted form. Now, while having it as a pelleted form is very easy to digest, there have been cases where you can cause your sheep to have bad gut to the point where they're having diarrhea, which is why I believe agricultural groups will tell you that a sheep ration is just supplemental to their diet instead of their actual full diet. And of course, there are feeding guidelines on the back of the bag to help you figure out what you should be feeding them a day. And also, it's just a nice little treat that your sheep will love. And if you want to deal with training, sheep ration is a really good way to help with training your sheep. So haltering them, getting them ready for a stand, making sure they're okay while they're getting sheared, though shearing sheep isn't that hard as long as you get their legs out from under them. And we will be talking about that more in a minute. Also, just make sure that water is readily available. Again, if you have 2 sheep, just having a large water basin for them is necessary. Making sure that it isn't frozen during the winter time with a water heater of some sort. I personally have had people who will go over and crack the water or the ice off of the water every morning. So if you need to do that, there is always that maneuver. And you can also insulate around the water basin with hay or other insulating mediums. Because I understand that there are some people who live off the grid and necessarily can't have heating elements. But, sheep are able to live in very cold places. And as long as you have a well-insulated shed or place for them to live in, then sheep do pretty well out, in northern climates, in very cold climates. And I'm really not worried about them when it comes to that. I have a lot of friends who didn't have heated sheds that kept their goats out in negative 20-degree weather because their fleeces will keep them warm. Their fleece in the middle of winter is going to make them warm and cozy. And really, you only need to worry about their feet, and as long as you have a good covered area for them to make shelter out of, their feet should be fine as well. They are a cloven-hooved beast, so you will need to take into consideration learning how to clip their hooves, or you're going to need to get a farrier, which is a person who works with horse, goat, sheep feet, cloven hooves of any kind that need to be worked on. And then, of course, there is the business of shearing the sheep. Now, there are a lot of people who only shear their sheep once a year. Usually it is springtime going into summer. And a lot of people, sheep farmers in general, have gone to using the electric shearer instead of the old-fashioned giant metal manual shears. And what you do with this, I think I'm going to explain both of them just because, again, if you decide that you don't want electrical, which I know a ton of people who are like, yeah, I really don't want to use a buzzer on my animal. It's a lot of money. I can save money by just getting shears. I know how to shear. Go for it. But if you're somebody who wants to or has a lot of sheep and you just want to get that fleece off of them quickly and not have to deal with the pain and time-consuming amount that manual shearing takes, completely understand that. So if you decide to do electrical shearing, It looks like a giant Bic shaver with a flat-headed buzzer on the top. And what this thing does is just does a very close shave where the fleece starts on the skin of the sheep. So basically you're giving a sheep a crew cut. And what you do as a simple way to get sheep sheared with nothing but the ground to deal with is you flip the sheep over off its legs. So it's on its butt, like it's sitting like a person, or you have them on their back. Personally, I know a lot of people who just do the method where they take the leg of the sheep, they put them on their butt, and then they hold the sheep's head in their arm and just keep them straddled against their legs. And then they take the buzzer and they start at the stomach, they clear off the wool on the stomach, and then they just start trimming all the way up into the neck area and then go on either side outward. So you start at the stomach on the inside and then just start working outward until you start shearing into the thicker parts of the fleece. Now, the fleece is the wool part of the animal. It is the coat that the sheep grows over the year or 12 months that you don't shear your sheep. It's basically their hair. And after you get done with the stomach, you turn them on their side. You will still have either a front arm and their head resting on you while you turn them. Again, you will follow the fleece all the way up into the back, and then you will turn them again and cut the fleece on the other side until it is all the way off the spine. And then you have a full fleece. Now, the nice thing about sheep is that they range in all shapes and colors. And I know that there are a lot of people who love to play with different colors and even dye their sheep wool. But for people who want natural sheep wool so they don't have to dye it, the colors range from white, black, silver, gray, red, brown, and then it's called morin. And that is a reddy brown, which is a Scottish term that was coined after red as the moors, which apparently there's a time of year, I'm guessing in the fall, where the moors of Scotland just turn this reddy brown color in the sunlight. And apparently it's a beautiful color. One day I will have to experience it to tell you more about it. But the lovely thing again is that there's just a versatility to sheep colors that we are able to dabble in. And also, on top of that, you can decide whether you want a full-sized sheep all the way down to a Shetland or a miniature sheep, which is very convenient because if you have less space, having miniatures makes it a lot easier to have multiple instead of having two large sheep. You also can grab hold of a Shetland a lot more easily. If you don't want to get into woolery as much as, a large farm, you don't have to have large sheep. And for some projects, if you are somebody who is like me, who spins the yarn and makes wool yarn from scratch, you might just want to have a smaller sheep anyway, so you can have your projects on a smaller scale compared to everybody else. Now, this isn't to say that having large sheep isn't a bad thing by any means. We have the ability to shear our own sheep and then take the fleece that you have obtained and take it to a factory where they will wash it, card it, which means that they're cleaning and separating the wool out and making making a workable fiber for you to use, and then they will ship it back to you for you to spin into yarn at a fee. I can tell you that unless you are doing it in a massive group of people, it is very expensive. In Alaska, we had a co-op where a bunch of farmers would come together and do an entire load. They would put their names on their fleeces, on the bags with their fleeces in it, and at the end of it, they would just come together and ship it all off together. And they would just take the proceeds of their allotted amount of weight, because they did this all by weight, and then they would divvy up the money that way. Now that you have all this fleece and you have decided to do the buzz cut route, let's look at it if you decided to do it completely manually, without help of any kind. You're out in the middle of the woods, you only have your sheep, your goats, your pigs, everything, and you have your manual shears. I will say it takes a lot more time if you haven't practiced. There's also a nice little tip that I've learned when you're about to shear your sheep that makes your fleece look nicer. And the thing is, for processing, this tip is very helpful. So, what you do is cut the very top of your sheep's fleece. Listen, it makes sense when I tell you why. It has been 12 months since you've cleaned, touched, dealt with this sheep. They've been outside the entire year since they have gotten their last haircut. It is muddy. There are things inside this fleece that is either growing or just laying in there, like burrs and pine cones and tree bits and branches and bark and whatnot. So being able to come over and clip off the top of it is very important, so you don't have to deal with the yuck in the fleece later when you're processing all of your fleece. Now, in saying this, it does make it a little bit more time consuming because you're going to be going over that sheep with your shears and just taking off some wool. Yes, you're going to have a little less wool to deal with, but in the long term, you're actually going to be saving yourself wool because all of that wool that you're taking off wasn't usable in the first place. Or it would have been so hard for you to try and use, you've been frustrated and crying at the end of the processing. So go ahead and shear off that top, inch of fleece. You've gotten all the dead bugs and branches out of there. The dirt is gone. All right. Now make sure that you have a clean area to put your sheep on its back. Again, you're going to take hold of it by a leg, put it on its back, make sure its back is on your legs. You have a hold of its head in your hand, and you're again going to shear it like you would on the sides. But instead of using a buzzer like you did before, you're going to take those shears and you're going to shear off the side of the belly on either side. You're going to clip the middle of it, and then you're going to put the sheep on its side, and you're going to work with your shears to clip along the side of the leg, along the side of the neck, and then you're going to go back down and just shear as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And the nice thing is you do gain a rhythm after a while. And yes, instead of shearing a sheep in like 3 minutes with a buzzer, it'll take you about 15 minutes after you've shorn your 20th sheep. And you just slowly get a rhythm. And again, you shear it on both sides, up the side, all the way up to the back, and then just on the spine, you clip, 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 all the way from the head down to the tail. Fleece is off. And then you let the sheep go on its way. Make sure to get the fleece off the top of the head and the ears. Check around the neck. After all the fleece has been harvested, you're going to take your fleece inside and you're going to clean it. After you've cleaned it, you're going to boil it. Now, this is the fun part. And the reason why I say this is the fun part is because there's going to be a sebum or an oil that you're going to find coming off of your wool. This is great. This is the oil called lanolin. You find this in a lot of different things, mainly lotions for hands, because it's very absorbent and it makes your skin very soft. Keep it and learn how to use it in different things. If you are somebody who likes to make lotions and soaps, lanolin is going to be your best friend. It will be very helpful for you in the long run. So, after you're done boiling your wool, and I will see about in the future doing a lanolin boiling recipe. You will take your wool out, you will let it dry, and then you will start cleaning it, which means you're going to be taking 2 carding brushes, which look like giant dog brushes with little metal tines coming out from them. And you will be taking pieces of wool that are clean now, and you will be brushing them against each other until all the fibers are going one way. As soon as you have cleaned and carded the wool, because again, carding is also going to be getting all the tiniest debris out. It is going to be getting any of the guard hairs out, and is going to be leaving you with, again, the fleece all lined in one direction, which is going to be super important when you start to spin your wool. And this is going to take you a couple of times. Processing wool is a very arduous journey. It is very hard work to be dealt with. But here's the thing. You come out with so much wool that you can make a lot of products with it. And if you want to make t-shirts, if you want to make pants, if you want to make wool hats, gloves, scarves, anything like that, having one fleece from a large sheep is going to make a lot of it, because you're not dealing with ounces. You're dealing with pounds of wool. And it will last you a while. So now that you've carded all of this wool, which is taking you hours and days and nights, most of the winter, to do, you're going to start spinning it. And if you have a spinning wheel, I am very proud of you. That is a bunch of money that I spent, and it's very worthy an investment. If you don't, you will be getting a spindle, which is a tiny wooden dowel. Excuse me one second. It is a tiny wooden dowel with a hook at the very end of it. And you will be twisting the fibers and turning fibers into yarn so you can knit, weave, crochet, anything and everything to make actual fabric. You are going to be making yarn out of it first in order to do this, unless you are a felter. If you're a felter, there's going to be a different way to do this. There are also many different ways to work with wool. I keep forgetting to tell you this. You can do boiled wool, felted wool, woven, yarn wool, and you can make so many different products out of all the different ways that you can deal with wool. It is the most versatile textile when it comes to the different ways that you can use it. Well, except for silk. Silk is also another one, but again, it's because the fiber is being used. And just also being wool and getting it from a sheep, it is just a massive amount of wool that you have. I mean, if you have 2 sheep and you live in a household where one person is doing all of this, and say you have 6 people living in your house, one fleece can take care of one person's clothing for 3 outfits. And I'm talking hat, gloves, scarf, pants, shirt. 3 outfits. 1 large sheep. Now, I will say this, unless they're a very tall person, then it's going to change completely. It'll probably go down to 1.5 outfits. But a fleece is a humongous piece of wool. Humongous. So, you will definitely want for nothing if you have the skill of working with sheep's wool. Now again, if you decide that you don't need that much wool, you can always go down to a smaller animal like a Shetland, which is extremely tiny in comparison. But again, a lot less food wastage, a lot more room for your small animals. These guys will you can breed them to make more of them. And also, they're just adorable. So I have nothing wrong with Shetlands. Also, if you have a Shetland ram that starts to try and get at you, it's a lot easier to grab their horns and shoo them away than going after a giant ram who has decided you are not allowed to come near the ewes. Because that happens. And nobody needs to get kicked or headbutted by a ram. That's just awful. Ugh. I mean, they can damage you. They are dangerous. But anyway, let's see. So I've talked to you about infrastructure, which is basically just building a shed for them and giving them a fenced off area. Unless you are on a large pasture, you can give them a free range to them. I've talked about food, vitamins, water, and how to shear them, whether it be electrical or manually. Also, you have the ability to transport, whether it be through a co-op or by yourself, your fleeces to a place where they can manufacture and clean your fleeces for you. Or I've given you the starting technique of how you would do it, the bare bones basics of cleaning your wool yourself and shearing manually. And I've given you the knowledge of having large sheep versus small sheep and the different colors of wool. And also I've taught you about lanolin, which again is very wonderful and something that you should look into in making lotions and soaps and even shampoos if you really want to get into it. It's just a very lovely agent for hydration and softening. All right. Oh, and of course, they're very delicious to eat. A lot of people love lamb. I personally love a rack of lamb. They make the most delicious food. They are a little bit different when it comes to flavor, of course, but it's still a mild, meaty flavor. Great seasonings, and just perfect for a good holiday. But at the end of the day, I will also say this, they are still living, breathing animals. They still have the means of needing a healthy, loving lifestyle, and they are a herd animal. So make sure to have at least 2 of them interact with your animals as much as you can, and just understand how to give them love and let them prosper in your care. All right, everyone. This is Classic Homesteading Practices, and I hope you enjoy this introduction to sheep. Have a wonderful day. Bye.